What's up, Deuterinos, and welcome back to another episode of the Game Addicts podcast. Today we are doing a deep dive of Resident Evil 3, and we're going to dive right into it. But first, if you guys are watching, well, I got a new setup. I got a whole new podcasting game room-ish setup. It's actually my bedroom. We've redone the bedroom. There's been a lot going on in my life, which is why there was kind of a gap between Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3. I do apologize for that. But we're here. We're here to talk about Resident Evil 3, and we're just going to dive right into it because the next episode is going to be like my catch-up, talking to you guys about what's been going on in my life, gaming, all that stuff. But that's next time. I made a promise. I'm going to do Resident Evil 3. And we're going to talk about it in a deep dive fashion. So here we are, guys. Resident Evil 3. And, you know, why am I only going to do the first three? Well, those are the first, the first three are like the ones that are the most deepest connected to me. You know, I played the first three, and then after that, you know, I did play 4, I did play 5, I played Code Veronica eventually, but it was the attachment of the first three that really, tied in my love for the series. And since then, that love it's waned a little bit. 7 kind of brought it back because it was kind of fun, it was new, but it was old at the same, But now we have, of course, right now we got 8 coming out, Village, and, am I going to get it day one? Probably not. I have watched the demos. I haven't even played the demos, but I've watched them, and maybe that's going to be determined later on. But today, Resident Evil 3. So Resident Evil 1, I already told that story about how I got that. Resident Evil 2 was the one that I really wanted, but I rented it, and then I got 1 for Christmas, and played through that, beat the crap out of 2. When it was time to play 3, I do believe 3 came out like a year after, like 99, something like that. I've got my copy here. This is, by the way, for anybody who is into retro collecting, I do believe, as of this recording, this, of course, it changes all the freaking time, right? It always changes. But retro collecting just in itself is like going through the roof. But Resident Evil 1, the big box version I have is like $100 now. Parasite Eve 2 is up there. I want to say Resident Evil 3. Yeah, Resident Evil 3, 66. This game, brand new, was it $40-$50? Now it's 66. All these years later, I didn't even pay that when I bought it. If you can, I do believe that this is available. Possibly on the PlayStation Store. Don't quote me on that. I want to say at one point all of the Resident Evils were. But there's ways to get it. Of course, they did the remake, which we'll be talking about and comparing to. But Resident Evil 3, I was super excited for. I do remember, at that point having played 1 and 2 to death. So when 3 was coming out in '99, I was all hype, all 100% hype, and I remember being on vacation. We went on vacation down to Texas. It was one of the very few vacations I ever actually got to experience as a child. We went down to Texas, went down to Galveston Island, and it was really nice. But here we are. I think we met up with some family, and we actually took a member of the family rode along to the airport. And while we're at the airport, I see a magazine cover for I want to say it was official U.S. PlayStation magazine. And of course, it used to come with demo discs. Well, this was a big feature. It was like the June edition, huge feature for Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. And it had so many screenshots and previews. I could not wait to get my hands on this game. It really seemed like it was going to be a further dive into Raccoon City, just like I really wanted in 2. And in Resident Evil 2, you spend like 2% of the game outside, like the game is broken up into the prologue streets, and then the big meat of the game is the police station, and then the sewers kind of, and then of course the final lab area. But in Resident Evil 3, you spend a lot more time out in the streets and alleyways, and I was super excited about that because I wanted to experience that all hell breaking loose as the zombies are taking over the city. I wanted to experience that. And Resident Evil 3 does kind of give you that. Now, this game wasn't supposed to be Resident Evil 3. Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, this game, was never supposed to have that number on it because it was kind of developed as a side shoot game. Of course, with the huge success of 1 and 2, now it's a franchise. Now they're like, all right, we got to have multiple games of development. Of course, around that time, you also had like Resident Evil Survivor and all this other stuff that came out, like first-person games or like the on-rail shooters or whatever. And it was kind of like that. But then they had this game, and then they had like Code Veronica was so when you look at the story and where the story of the series goes, Code Veronica is the true sequel to Resident Evil 1 and 2. It is. Resident Evil 1 has Chris and Jill. Resident Evil 2 has Claire, Chris's sister, and Leon. Resident Evil Code Veronica has Claire and Chris. It's like marrying the two together. The stories finally merge. The story from the whole umbrella thing kind of continues on. Resident Evil 3 was more of a heavy action oriented, or it was like steering the boat that way. And what's funny is that you'll see the same kind of thing happen with Dino Crisis. Dino Crisis came out before Nemesis because it came with like a demo. My copy of Dino Crisis has a demo of Nemesis. And of course, it was like Resident Evil meets dinosaurs. It was really cool. But then there's some things that they would add, like the quick turns and things to kind of speed up the gameplay a little bit. Because I mean, the controls for Resident Evil 3 still are the tank controls. I mean, but they're trying to make it more arcadey. Well, then of course you would get Nemesis, which would be like they would utilize a lot of different cheats or development techniques to help render down the graphics. So the graphics were down a little bit, but they were able to fit more enemies on screen at one time. So now you had more chaos, and because of that, it was a little more action. You got a little more ammo. It wasn't as scarce-ish, and you had more like destructible environments with like the red barrels. You could gather enemies and just blow them all up. Well, then Dino Crisis 2 took it a whole other route and made it just really arcadey. But for Nemesis, the idea was to make it a more of an action movie type deal where you're running through and you're running and gunning, but still keep it with that same kind of style that you've kind of known and grown. And to be honest with you, it does seem like a natural progression once you played through the really empty mansion comparatively. And then, the police station, by the time you get to 3 and there's enemies everywhere, you feel like, the game starts you off with an assault rifle. So you're just like mowing down everybody. As a kid, this is like the epitome of fun. It's absolutely just amazing to play. But, as I said, it wasn't originally supposed to be 3. So why was it 3? Well, of course, they had they had to do a PlayStation and everything. And somehow internally it got slapped with a number 3. Whereas when you the story is relatively short, the stories were never really. It never really was like the focus point. I mean, yes, it was, but it was like zombies and everything. It wasn't super convoluted. It would get there. And then, of course, the remakes would hash it out and make the stories more, have more meat on the bones, if you will. But for Resident Evil 3, they made this story about, and they put Jill in it to help tie it into, the first one. But, there was no scenario B. Like in Resident Evil 1, you had Chris scenario, Jill scenario. Is that basically you played the same game but through different perspectives. In Resident Evil 2, you had the same idea, but now you had scenario. You had A and B scenarios. So you could play A scenario went left, B scenario went or went right or whatever, and whichever one you picked first, You know, say you picked Leon first, so you played a scenario with Leon. Well, now once you beat that, you can go through and play Claire the exact same scenario and have a slightly different story tied to that. But then, if you beat Leon's A, you can play Claire's B, which starts you off in a different area. It gives you a different path through the police station, and there's some different things to enjoy with that. And once you beat that version or beat scenario B, you've beaten the game. Like, you get the true ending. And they would continue that with the remake, even though the remake would make the scenarios slightly less divergent. It would kind of keep it. It would change some stuff around from how you did things and kind of increase difficulty a little bit. But it wouldn't really deviate until the end. I mean, really. Because they really went out of their way to make the Claire story and Leon's story really different within themselves. With Resident Evil 3, you had one. You had Jill. That was it. You had one story path, and you got to switch to a different character at some point in the game and then switch back. That was it. Same thing with the remake, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But so therefore, you have a inherently shorter campaign, which I want to say Resident Evil 3 was the one they brought in Mercenaries, where you could kind of have this arcade mode where you play as the Umbrella Corps, and you run around trying to save people. Just, you get points, and you get to unlock different things with that. So it was like a different mode. The remake would do the same thing with the Resident Evil Online Survive. I can't remember what it was called now. I never even played it. I had no desire to play the online mode. I just wanted to play the single player. Resident Evil 3, therefore, is a much shorter, more concise experience, and that's not altogether a bad thing. Especially with me getting up into like my 30s, I got kids. Sometimes playing a shorter game is fun to me. I actually get to dive in, have my fun with it, and be done with it, and it was a good experience. I do enjoy my RPGs. I do enjoy sitting down for hours upon hours exploring and stuff like that, but sometimes I don't have the time to do that. I don't have time to just sit there and play. Well, I got, like a 5-year-old and almost 2-year-old running around. I can't. I just can't. So, therefore, the shorter game last year when the remake came out, a lot of people were complaining about that, about the length and how it kind of diverged. And I was perfectly fine with it, but we'll get there. Resident Evil 3, the original release, came out in 99. I want to say it was like November or somewhere around that. And it scared the absolute daylights out of me, just like 2 did. Absolutely. I was not ready for it. Yes, I played 2. Nemesis is like the new villain of the game, kind of a new tyrant. And very similar to Mr. X and how he follows you around. A lot of people feel like he's more random, but in true reality, he does have triggers in the original game. A lot of people felt like in the remake, it wasn't as random. He showed up at exactly the same right points, and it was the exact same way in the first one. However, you felt like it was more random because you'd run by an alleyway a couple times, and one time you did, he was coming at you and out of the blue. But really, it was because you met a certain threshold that, like, whether you were carrying a certain item or not, and now he's going to show up and come at you. Nemesis does take a lot to take down. And if you play through the game on normal mode, you'll get rewards. You'll get like first aid packs. Where I think there's a pack where you can carry like 3 first aids in one thing, so it saved up space in your inventory. You got like handgun parts for like badass handgun, a bunch of different stuff that you could get on easy mode. If you played Resident Evil 3 Nemesis on PS1 on easy mode, you started off with almost everything. You had shotguns, bazookas, magnums. Assault rifles. You were loaded to the T to go out and take on the world. It made it fun, but overall they did make it to where ammo was a lot less scarce in the original game now, especially compared to 1 and 2. Whereas it's still survival horror, and you need to save your items, but they're like, you have a tyrant chasing you around where you're going to pump ammo into. You have a lot of more enemies that you're going to pump into, and so they give you opportunities to either find more ammo or find gunpowder. They introduce a gunpowder tool for you to make your own gunpowder or ammo based on what gunpowder you find: handgun, shotgun, whatever. You can make a bunch of different ones, so that way you're more armed and more ready for what's around the corner. And one thing they also did was randomization. They made more item placements, not key items, but like ammo and stuff like that would be a little bit more random. And then also hazards, like, okay, for example, in Resident Evil 2, when you go to put certain things in, like you'd have zombies bust through the window at you or something like that. Those were programmed to do that. Well, in Resident Evil 3, they made it to where if you run by this car door 17 times, he may never pop out. But if you play it on another playthrough, he might come out on the second time. You're like, oh man, that never happened to me before. So they made it a little bit more random in that aspect. Man, what else can I talk about before I dive into the actual story? Because the story's kind of minimal, but like we'll talk about it. Gameplay wise, let's see, I talked about the controls, the quick turns. Oh, okay. So the decisions. So Resident Evil 3 introduced a decision-based like key moments. So like you get to pick one or two. Which one do you want to pick? And depending on what you would pick, it would drastically kind of change the outcome of that scenario that you're in. If you run away, you might get taken to another area that you wouldn't see otherwise if you didn't pick that. Or if you do another way, if you try to maybe it's like stand your ground or run. So like the very beginning in the police station, if you stand your ground, you're going to sit there and you're going to fight the Nemesis the first time. Good luck, by the way. You're going to be pumping in like 28 handgun bullets into him just to knock him down, and it's not worth your ammo or your time at this point. So the best move is to duck inside because he's not going to follow you immediately inside. You're going to have time to kind of like run around and get your bearings. But that's a choice. But literally all roads lead to Rome essentially. Like these choices, they change what you're going to do, but they don't change the overall outcome. So the police station. One thing that I really enjoyed about Resident Evil 3 was how the story takes place kind of before and after Resident Evil 2. So Resident Evil 2 takes even though the overall length of 3 is shorter, the sequence of events take place like around that same time. So you actually get to go into the police station at the beginning of the game, and you get to wander around the police station. And even in like 99, even though you just played Resident Evil 2, it gave you a sense of like nostalgia. Like, oh my gosh, I'm back at the police station. This is awesome. I'm going to run around here and do some stuff. And that's something that we hadn't really seen a lot before in like other games. Now, see, development of this game was relatively fast, all things considered, because you had Resident Evil 2 came out in 98, 3 came out in 99. It was like literally the next year. It's not like today where we had the remake of Resident Evil 2, and then it took like almost like, was it a full year or almost 2 years? It was something like that. But like they were developing at the same time, and they didn't release at the same time. But like game development nowadays, if you have a full direct sequel to a game or another game, sometimes it can take years. Back then, they were pumping them out, man. And so it came out a year later. So you're already in it. You're in the police station. One of the things I wasn't ready for when I played the game was the fact that Nemesis isn't just another tyrant that chases you and throws you around. The dude carries a rocket launcher sometimes and will shoot you with the rocket launcher. When you're in the police station for the very first time and you're running through, say you ducked him. You duck him and you run inside. He's banging on the door and you're like, haha, I'm in here. I'm going to go into Star's office, find my stuff, and I'm going to do my thing. Well, when you come back down from Star's office, he busts through the window. Okay. And he's got a rocket launcher and he's going to shoot you with it. That's not good. But then if you run through that door, one thing that Mr. X had, and how this differs, was that Mr. X would follow you for certain areas, and he was really slow and lumbering. Like you can duck him and run around and lose him. In Resident Evil 3, you run around Nemesis. He's got that rocket launcher, and you run down the hallway. You run into the evidence lockers, or all those safes, and you run into the main offices. And now you're like, okay, I got to get out of here. Well, now it's going to trigger. He's going to be right behind you. So you need to be running. But then if you go through that door, he's not going to follow you through that door into the main hall. So you have areas where he is going to keep following you and keep being a thorn in your side. And if are you going to panic and try to fight him, or are you going to keep running and stay on path? You need to make that decision, right? And I actually really like that. I thought that was a really neat a wrench to throw at you. The music is pretty much the same. I don't recall having any really attachment or strong emotions about the music either way in 3. It was akin to what we've heard before, but I think RE2 might have more like iconic tracks or like original tracks. But it's along that same vein. What else can I really say about the original game before we dive into the story aspect? I really can't think of much. So I think we're just going to go right into the story. So the story starts off with Jill making her final escape, and she's going to escape Raccoon City. Everything's going nuts. Everything's blowing up. In fact, when you first see her in the very beginning of the game, it just blows up. And she like blows out of an alleyway, and there's zombies all around you, and you're trying to escape. And you're trying to make your way through. And you eventually run into Brad Vickers. He was the helicopter pilot from Resident Evil 1 who left you and ultimately came back to get you, but he left you. And you two are the last 2 STARS members in town. Chris is out, Barry's out, Rebecca's out. You know, we don't know where we don't know where these people are, but if they're not in the city, and Brad says there's something out here chasing after STARS members. And that something is Nemesis. Umbrella sent Nemesis to quiet down the STARS members from blowing the lid on everything and to help try to contain the mess that they've created. So that's what you do. You're rolling through. You're trying to escape. You run into Carlos and the Umbrella Corps, and you know they say they're there to help the people and get them out. Really, there's some other stuff kind of going on where, come on, it's some Umbrella trickery kind of going on around here. The locations, you have the big city, like alleyways and other areas and other businesses that you go into. You have the police station that you duck in just for a little bit. You're not even there for that long. You're just there for like a cup of coffee, and then you leave. But then the goal was to try and get the train car moving. You get the train car moving. Then you get blown into like a clock tower, and Jill gets infected, apparently. So Nemesis is a lot like William Birkin, or like the G virus. I don't recall if Nemesis is a G creation, because obviously the G was very specific to like mutate. But Nemesis does mutate. The more that you do damage to him, and the more that you hurt him, he does mutate. So I'm kind of thinking there's a link here, because eventually he gets to mutate and he infects Jill with the T virus. That's when you take over as Carlos and you run over to the hospital to try and synthesize a vaccine. So there's this whole side segment. What I really like is that there's a variety in the enemies as well. You have the zombies, you have the dogs, they're back. You have Nemesis, Tyrant chasing you around. Okay, that's new. That's not new, but it is that the whole running and rocket launcher thing is new. So there's that. But then you have like these new enemies that are I'm not sure what they are. They're like these. They kind of remind me of the monkey things in Resident Evil 1 that are hanging from the ceiling, but they're not quite that. And then, of course, you have the Hunters. The Hunters return from Resident Evil 1. They're in the hospital. Really hate the Hunters. I hated them in RE1 and I hate them in 3. But the part that you play as Carlos is pretty short-lived, and then you take back over as Jill. And then, of course, the government's going to blow up the city. So then eventually you end up having to leave the city. I kind of skipped over some stuff, but like that's kind of like the gist of it. You have to stop. I'm trying to remember the name of the umbrella. It's not Mikhail. It's the other guy. But one of those guys is a douche, and is basically kind of screwing you over along the way. And then you need to try and escape. So you have to destroy Nemesis, which is Nemesis ends up metamorphosing into this big giant thing that you have to try and defeat. And then you escape with Carlos. That's the end. Like, I'm going to take Umbrella down. That's what that's the end. There's also a secret ending. I can't remember how you get it. It's a certain time frame, or if it's New Game Plus or whatever it is, where instead of Carlos flying you out, Barry shows back up. They don't even say his name. They don't show his face. Jill just goes, "Is that?" He goes, "I couldn't let you die." Come on, it's Barry. But it's very, it's like a secret ending. It's not even the real ending. So, all in all, while it's fun, I don't really think it's as good or even iconic as like 2 or anything like that. And unfortunately, I feel the same way about the remake. Not that it's altogether a bad thing. One thing that I really enjoyed about the remake, and this is something that some people didn't like, I liked that it was a lot more different. It had similar aspects about it. Had similar things of what we were doing. We have the streets segments. We have trying to get the train car rolling. We have a hospital section. We have a lab section. Some of those are the exact same kind of things that we do. Other things are completely different. So yes, the remake of Resident Evil 3 is a little bit more action-oriented compared to RE2. What I like about this is that this RE3 is definitely a sequel to the RE2 that we got, which a lot of people, including myself, are really hyped for its release, and I had a lot of fun with it and do enjoy it a lot. I think it's really good. The problem is that it's the exact same problem as the original. The original Resident Evil 2 and the remake of Resident Evil 2 are so good that this just falls flat in comparison. Not maybe flat, maybe that's too strong of a term, but it definitely falls short due to that. The story in the remake is also shorter, but again, I don't see that as a real big problem. It's fine. It's about 6 hours. I want to say RE2. Each one is about 6 hours, so you have like 10 or 12 hours. Then you have now you can flip them and do the other scenarios. So you get other stuff to keep you kind of occupied to help make the game last longer. With this one, see, originally they were going to do Resident Evil 2 and 3 as like a bundle, or at least that was the rumor, and this one wasn't ready. 3 wasn't ready. So you think about it, we would have got RE2 and 3 as a remake bundle, and that would have been just like a big bang for your buck. Well, when they didn't do that and they waited, they bundled the remake with like an online game, Resistance. I looked at the back of the case I have sitting right next to me. It wasn't Survive. That was Metal Gear Survive. Survive, Resident Evil. Come on now. Throw me a freaking bone, right? No, it's Resistance. I never even played it. I had no desire to play it. I'm not an online game guy anyway, but no. So they did that. They molded that in to try and make it more worth the $60. In reality, the remake of Resident Evil 3 is not worth $60. It just isn't. Is it worth $40? Maybe. If you find it for $20-$25, yeah, grab it. It's a good. That's good enough cost for your bang right there, and you're gonna have fun with it. I guarantee you. The whole Nemesis in the remake works similar, but also, like I said, I actually like the way the game begins a lot. It throws you for a loop. Jill's having her nightmare kind of deal, and then comes out of it, gets a phone call from Brad, and there's Nemesis right busting through your apartment wall and chasing you throughout the apartments. I thought it kicks you off in high gear right away. And also the intro is all like, they have like the riot and the live action talking about the pandemic. I'm like, this was a little weirdly timed for when it came out in early April of 2020, when everything was on quarantine from a global pandemic. It was very ironically timed. Though I love the gameplay of the RE3 remake. I like that the gameplay shifts twice. You get to play as Carlos twice, and I liked the change. For Carlos, Your plan is Jill. I actually like Carlos's representation a lot better in the remake. I thought they did actually a pretty decent job with him. He's a decent dude, looking out for Jill, and he truly believes that he's a part of something that's going to be trying to help people, and that this is a mess. And she's like saying, "Hey, umbrellas is the cause of all this." He's like, "Look, I don't know anything about that. I'm just trying to help these people." It's simple, but it's effective. So. Nemesis, you have a couple boss fights with Nemesis, which I actually really like. They kind of do that in the original as well, where they make you have a standoff with him. But for some reason in the remake, they make it feel bigger and they make it feel like an actual event. Whereas in the original, it's like, okay, here you are, fight him. Do it. But no, in this one, yeah, you had the fight with the flamethrower, which I thought was really fun. And then after that, he mutates, and then you fight him again at the clock tower. So the clock tower's in there, but it's not a big, long section or anything like that. You're just there, and he's running around the courtyard of the clock tower, and you're trying to use these mines to get him and kill him. And once again, Jill gets infected. But what I like is that for the control parts, after the first boss fight, it shifts over. Now you're Carlos with your buddy. I don't remember his name. I believe he's a new character just for the remake of RE3. And now you're at the police station. So you're going through the police station from RE2 remake as Carlos, certain sections, and you're doing this stuff. And what I really like is that you're trying to get to the STARS office and you can't get there. So part of the reason why why there's a big hole in the showers is because of Carl. He needs to bust down a wall to get there. Hey man, you got to do what you got to do. But what I also liked is that there are liquors here. The liquors are in the original RE3. There were no liquors around. They weren't doing anything. They didn't do anything with that enemy type. In RE2 remake, just like RE2, that they're in the police station and they're running around in there. What I like is that in RE3, when you go to the police station, there's actually some liquors in here that you might have to contend with because they're here anyways. So they're only really here. They might be in a few other spots, maybe in the hospital. In fact, yes, there are a couple in the hospital, but I like their inclusion because they just keep you on your toes. While Carlos is in the police station, he gets a radio call, or he calls Jill, and Jill just got done beating Nemesis. And for that first real big boss fight with him. And he's running over to try and get her. Meanwhile, they're looking for this scientist that they're told to get out of there. And this scientist can make a vaccine to the T-virus, whatever. He's holed up in this hospital. And by the time Carlos gets to Jill, she's fought Nemesis again. He infects Jill with the T-virus. So then that's when the hospital thing sets up. And what I really like about the hospital section this time is that instead of it being like Carlos takes Jill to the clock tower church or whatever, lays her down and goes to his thing and comes back, they're in the hospital. He's running around the hospital trying to make a vaccine. There's zombies, there's lickers, there's hunters. He's doing his thing. You're pretty well equipped as him to deal with everything, but it still kind of keeps you on your toes. What I like about RE3 remake is that while it's just as action oriented as it's a little bit more, it still kind of makes you kind of eye your equipment a little bit and make sure you have enough to deal with what you need to deal with. It doesn't overly give you a bunch of ammo just to give it to you. But then after you go through the hospital, then there's some things that you can only get with Jill. So then there's some sections of the hospital that you can run through and get with Jill, and then you make your way down to this underground lab, Nest 2, because that scientist is found dead. What do you know? I can't remember the dude's name. The asshole, because I remember Mikhail or Nikolai. Nikolai, that's his name. So Nikolai is a real bastard, and he ends up getting the vaccine. Not the one that you give to Jill. He does give the one to Jill, but they want one. The government's going to destroy the city unless they can produce the vaccine. And, things happen. That doesn't happen, right? So then you have another big boss fight, just like the courtyard in the clock tower with Nemesis. Except this time now there's enemies at you, and they have stronger naked white zombies, and you gotta stay out of their way, and then you gotta electrocute him, and then he evolves even more. He evolves even more, where then now, just like in the original game, he's this big, huge, gelatinous blob of thorns and teeth and spikes and all this stuff. And she has this big, gigantic laser, so to speak. Laser. And she's going to shoot him with it. What I really like is, of course, you shoot him with the laser once, and then you got to like put all of these things back in. These little like coolant tanks or whatever, and there's like I don't know if there's 4 or 6 of them, something like that. And he's trying to get you, and you're shooting at him to like stun him to try and go push those back in. But when you finally shoot him with the laser, she shoots him with the laser, knocks him down, and then brings this giant rail gun, sticks it in his mouth, and shoots at full blast, killing Nemesis. It is really cool. It really it really reminded me a lot of like Aliens or one of the Alien movies, like where she does that. But man, fun game, fun ride, and then of course the vaccine I believe does get destroyed, and then they end up destroying the city. Anyways, but then you escape with Carlos, and it's a fun, albeit I wouldn't call it super short. It was shorter than like maybe modern games are, but it's enjoyable. When it came out at $60, I bought it at $60 because I was really excited to play it. But a lot of people were disappointed that they didn't really get the bang for their buck, and I completely understand that. Now that the game has been out for over a year, see how much it costs out there. See if you can get it for that $20 or $25. I believe it's worth it, and I believe it is worthy to be in a collection of modern Resident Evil games. In fact, my personal opinion, I liked 7, but I think Resident Evil 2 Remake is the perfect Resident Evil game they've ever made. The perfect mix of old, the perfect mix of new, and 3 continues that. It's almost like a expansion. So, like, the remake, if you have to ask me which one of these do I prefer, it's the remake. It is the remake. Even though they made so many changes to it, that's actually what I liked about it. The RE2 remake, I liked that they kept a lot of stuff the same, but they changed a lot of stuff too. But in this one, it's like they went a little bit further with those changes, with the overall changes to the settings and everything, while keeping certain key elements there. Now, the team that made RE3 were supposedly working on the remake of RE4 and got booted off of it because they were keeping it too similar. Apparently, Capcom. Now, I'm going into rumor and conjecture now. We don't know if any of these things are true. This is stuff that we've just heard. Resident Evil 4 is getting remade. I'm not sure how I feel about that. I'm not necessarily excited about it. So, where do I lie? Like, I definitely I'm the guy who's waiting to pick up. I waited to pick up 7 for so long because I was like, I don't know, man. I don't know. I'm kind of worn out on it. And I tried 6 and hated it. So it was like, I don't even want to go back to it, And then I finally played 7 and I liked it. It was different, but it brought back the tension. 8 seems like it's going to go along the same way by bringing in some stuff from 4, like the item management and craft, like they're buying stuff. But overall, it's trying to keep tension, which I'm for. So therefore, it's not something that I'm against. RE4 does not sit as well with my nostalgia as 1, 2, and 3 did. I played it. I liked it. I thought it was cool. I'm not sure where I sit on it. I guess I'll have to wait and see. But from what all the rumors were, that the team that made RE3 Remake was developing RE4 Remake, and they were responding to the fan reaction that came out that they didn't like some of the deviations of what made RE3, the original RE3. So they were trying to keep RE4 more faithful to what it was, while as Capcom is like, no, if we're going to remake a game, we're going to remake a game. We're going to change it up. Well, which I actually kind of agree with what they did with RE2 and RE3. That was like, here we are. I am on board with that. So I might be in the minority of that, but I think it works good, and I think you guys should go check out the remake of 3, for the right price. That's, I am a cheap ass gamer. I might have a decently sized gaming collection or anything like that, but I definitely didn't go buy out every single one of my games at $60 brand new or even more. For the games I really love, yes, I buy them brand new, and I buy them when they come out, and I'm hyped. That's why I paid $60 for RE3, and I altogether wasn't upset about it. But I recognize the fact that it definitely doesn't contain the value of a $60 game. So, I mean, the RE3 fits right in, and they're doing a remake of RE4. If I can be completely honest with you, RE1 doesn't need another remake, but I almost wish they would do a remake of RE1 in the same style of RE2 and 3. Why? Because I'm a glutton, and I need another copy of RE1, right? No, I don't. No, it doesn't need it, but man, there's a part of me that's like, man, I wish they would just I could have that 1, 2, and 3 with the same kind of gameplay, same kind of item management and style, so that would you would have that complete trilogy, I guess, congruent all the way across. But that is me, guys. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you enjoyed me rambling and sharing my thoughts about these 2 games. They're definitely worth your time, and get them on the cheap, man. Buy cheap. Support developers to buy brand new when you can if you really want to. But if you're worried about your buck, especially with how the economy is and the worldwide palindrome, if you will, that's everything's kind of going on. You need some games. RE3's been out RE3 remake's been out for a year. Pick it up on sale if you can, buds. But that's gonna do it for me on this episode of the Game Addicts podcast, Deep Dive on Resident Evil 3. I've been Brando. You can check out the podcast and everywhere that you can find podcasts. If you've listened this far, you already know, but we also do YouTube and social medias at Game Addicts Play. You can also check out the other podcasts that I'm a part of. We just launched Rank 'Em All podcast, which is a kind of a music review podcast that we do over at rankemal.rocks, as well as all the major podcast platforms and YouTube. Join us on social media at Rank 'Em All, and we're on Facebook. We have a good community over there of we post stuff and comment and get a good dialogue along about some music, about some rock and heavy metal music going on over there with other genres and artists to come. So a lot of fun kind of going on over there. Meanwhile, next episode of this podcast is going to be the catch-up podcast. Going to tell you what's going on in my world, what I've been playing, and what's to come. What are we going to talk about after that? So until then, I've been Brando. Thank you guys so much, and I'll see you later. Game on.